The UK government just signed off on turning social media into a mandatory digital checkpoint, and honestly, the sheer absurdity of where this is heading is just completely unhinged. Like, just picture being a fully grown guy and then your favorite app is just suddenly asking you to scan your face or upload a picture of your digital ID before it'll let you watch a cooking video on YouTube or scroll through like Twitter for 5 minutes. Because that is exactly the world this sets up. So on June 15th of this year, with the Prime Minister of the UK, they officially announced a sweeping nationwide ban on social media for anyone under the age of 16, with the actual rules set to land in the spring of next year. He framed this as a heroic move to give kids their childhood back, boldly stating that tech giants had their chance and failed, so the government is just stepping in to pretty much set a new normal. But the actual mechanical reality of enforcing this across platforms like TikTok, Snapchat, Insta, and just like even more is an absolute logistical nightmare. Like, while the government is trying to calm people down by claiming that you won't have to literally hand over your government issued ID, digital rights groups are already raising the alarm about the age verification companies handling all this and just how your private data actually gets protected. To successfully block kids while the system inadvertently treats every single adult as a child until they prove otherwise. Like, it fundamentally shifts the entire architecture of the internet from an open, easily accessible, like public square almost, into a highly restricted zone where just casual browsing is just locked behind strict verification protocols. Like, the audacity of treating every internet user like a potential runaway teen, like, I don't know, sneaking into a club, is mind-blowing, especially when you realize that enforcing this legislation means everyday people are just going to be strong-armed into navigating incredibly invasive verification systems just to maintain access to basic digital entertainment, really. The biggest technical joke about this entire digital checkpoint system is honestly that forcing massive sweeping age verification completely ignores pretty much the fundamental reality of how easily these systems practically fail and how recklessly they handle our sensitive information. So whenever lawmakers pretty much suggest using a trusted third-party vendor, quote unquote, to handle the age checks, will sound super clean and just secure on paper. But in practice, it is essentially like handing your driver's license to a bouncer at a club, only to watch that bouncer just immediately run to the back room, just photocopy your ID, log your exact location, also just record the specific time you arrived for good measure, and just quietly sell all that information to a third-party data broker. Like, critics have rightly pointed out that creating any system robust enough to perfectly screen out a determined 14-year-old will just effectively requires age verifying every single adult user as well. Like, we have already seen independent cybersecurity researchers pretty much repeatedly proving that these so-called quote-unquote secure digital ID vendors, they just frequently use complex hidden webs of fourth-party contractors to actually process your documents, meaning your highly sensitive legal identity is just constantly bouncing around between obscure servers that you just have no idea about and just never agreed to interact with. By forcing every internet user in the UK to jump through hoops to verify their age, where the government is not just creating a mild inconvenience, they are actively orchestrating a massive systemic erosion of digital privacy that turns your real-world identity into a highly trackable commodity tied directly to just every single meme you like every video you watch, it's like every comment you leave online. And honestly, the absolute most ridiculous part of this entire technical charade that the tech-savvy kids will just find like an incredibly simple workarounds anyway. Like, people will find a way to bypass it, like using a parent's device, borrowing like an older siblings, or just using a VPN. So instead of actually creating a perfectly safe internet for the little kids, while the government is just forcing millions of responsible adults to permanently dox themselves to massive tech conglomerates and also just shadowy verification vendors, essentially burning down the fundamental right to online privacy just to performatively swat at a problem that cannot be solved with heavy-handed digital checkpoints. The absolute scariest part of this entire situation is that the UK's massive social media ban is not just some isolated political experiment. It is rapidly becoming the global blueprint for a terrifying global domino effect that could permanently alter the very fabric of the internet for everyone on Earth. The UK is actually modeling their aggressive ban based on legislation passed in Australia, which was the first nation to ban kids under 16 from using social media. However, the UK government is taking things significantly further, actually, extending these heavy-handed restrictions beyond just basic social feeds to include things like gaming platforms and also live streaming services, just to ensure kids can't be contacted by strangers. Once a massive, highly influential Western nation like the UK just successfully normalizes the idea of treating the internet like a restricted ID-gated club, it gives every other government the perfect green light to start demanding the exact same sweeping surveillance powers under the exact same unassailable guise of child protection. We're already seeing other places like Denmark, Canada, France, Brazil, and also specific states here in the US announcing or developing similar measures, signaling a massive coordinated shift away from the free and open web we all kind of grew up with. Ultimately, this isn't really a story about keeping kids safe supposedly from addiction or dangerous online strangers. It is a story about the fundamental, irreversible normalization of mass digital identification, where the simple act of logging onto a website just requires you to surrender your anonymity to a corporate entity. And as we watch these mandatory checkpoints just pop up across the globe, the undeniable reality that the era of casually browsing the internet is kinda in danger. The absolute funniest part about the government's entire defense of this whole rollout, though, is how they completely try to brush off the obvious fact that tech-savvy kids will just find a way to bypass the system. When confronted with the reality that kids are already easily finding ways to bypass the ban in Australia, for example, what the UK PM just told the press, it doesn't matter, arguing that just because a kid, for example, can find a way to secretly buy a drink doesn't mean that we should just stop banning alcohol sales to minors. He just completely missed the fundamental point, though, with that whole analogy. A physical bartender checking an ID at a local pub doesn't log your exact geolocation, photocopy your driver's license, and store it on a permanent digital server that is just a prime target for hackers. Even the US Embassy in London has cautioned against this approach, pointing out the massive complication burden that it will force onto US companies trying to operate overseas. It is a total unmitigated mess, and while the intention of keeping kids safe online is obviously important while building the largest, most intrusive digital checkpoint system, and honestly the history of the internet is an utterly insane way to achieve it. And honestly, if you want the perfect real-world proof that this whole sort of verification scheme is just a disaster waiting to happen, well, you don't even have to imagine some sort of hypothetical future, because it already blew up in everyone's faces once. So I always bring it up, but back in October of last year, well, Discord, it got hit with a massive data breach where tens of thousands of people's government ID images, driver's license, passports, all of that, this exact kind of photos that people were forced to upload just to prove their age, well, it was all leaked and exposed into the wild. That is a literal dream scenario these lawmakers are building towards. Well, except instead of just protecting anybody, it just simply hands hackers a treasure chest of real human faces and also legal documents that are just tied to real names. And it gets even funnier, because the very first day the UK actually switched on its existing age checks back in July of last year, while VPN downloads across the nation would have spiked over 1,400% as people scrambled to dodge the whole sort of thing within hours. So the system is just already leaking sensitive data and already getting bypassed at scale, and they're just somehow doubling down on it anyway. So yeah, anyway, that's the first video. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you next time.